皆さんこんにちは。教育というのも、だんだん国際化してきまして、日本の若い人たちがですね、海外に出て、勉強する、教育を受けるっていう機会はどんどん増えてきてるわけなんですけども、一方、海外のですね、教育者が日本に来て、特に医学、医療界で、教育してくれると、なかなか人数的にはまだ非常に少ない、状況です。で、そんな中ですね、イギリスから渡ってきて、もちろんイギリス生まれのイギリス育ちなんですけども、イギリスから日本に渡ってきて、日本の医学教育のために、特に若者の学生さん、研修医たちの教育のために、長年尽力を尽くしてくださっている、ジョエル・ブランチ先生が今日のスピーカーです。ジョエルは、そうですね、英語でもちろん、いろいろ、教育をしてるわけなんですけども、その中で、日本とイギリスの違いとかですね、日本のいいところ、あるいはもしかすると短所みたいなところも気づいていらっしゃるでしょうし、さらに日本の教育とか医療がね、将来どうなっていくかって未来的なことも、お話しいただけるんじゃないかと思いますので、ジョエル、今日はよろしくお願いします。Okay, from now on,
Thank you.
let's start in English. And I just introduced about you briefly.
Yes.
And so now all yours. So you can start your share screen and then start talking about today's presentation. 未来の医師への贈り物 Present to doctors to be in future. This is 112th. He's now belongs to the Yao Tokushuukai General Hospital. And his catchphrase today is question everything. So now all yours. So please start your presentation.
Well, thank you very much for kindly inviting me to do this interview today and to present about me.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. My pleasure.
it's very unusual to be asked to talk about myself, and I feel a little bit unusual to be doing that. Normally, I'm talking about patients rather than myself. Uh, so yes, thank you very much. So, um, as an introduction, really, I've been living and working in Japan as an educator 100% of the time since 2006.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I'm into my 18th year working in Japan.
I see.
Uh, and I first started at the Shonan Kamakura
Mhm.
General Hospital, which
Right.
is the flagship of the Tokushuukai
Mhm.
medical group. And I worked there for 15 years.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, I decided that I wanted to broaden my horizons and um, change the focus of my career.
Mhm.
And I moved therefore to Kansai,
Say
to
okay.
the Yao Tokushukai General Hospital.
Yeah.
Um, that's my main hospital, but I'm now teaching in many hospitals in Tokushukai across the country.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very brief overview of my career so far. But the question I have, or the comment I have down below on this slide, is to question everything, and I'll go through that more as I go through.
Okay.
So if I move on to my next slide, I'm actually, as you mentioned, from England, イギリスから.
Mm.
And where I've got circled at the bottom is a town called Bournemouth.
Okay.
I wasn't born there actually. I was born a little bit more east in England, but I moved to there when I was quite young into Bournemouth. So I regard that as my hometown now.
Yeah.
And this is a very nice place. It's a holiday making place. So
Oh.
people go there from across the country and from some parts of Europe to Bournemouth. And it's a place where people retire
Mm.
and another place where people like to study English.
Oh.
So there's many English schools
Oh, really?
in the area,
Oh.
and it's right on the south coast, so they get the best weather. Um, I could say best weather in England, but weather in England's not good anyway. But it's still better than most places.
I see.
So that's those two people there. The older one is my old older brother called Simon, and that's
Okay.
me in the
Oh,
blue. In the blue, that's my favorite color, by the way, blue.
I see.
That's me when I
Oh,
was
you're a big guy.
yes, yes, still big eyes. So yes, that was me when I was well, probably several months old. My
I
brother
see.
holding me. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh,
So
nice.
this is Bournemouth. This is
Oh,
Bournemouth, and they have a lovely pier that goes out to sea, and they have a theatre on there, and I'm not sure how far it goes out, but several hundred meters into the water,
I see. Oh,
and you
nice.
can
Looks
see the
nice. Uh-huh.
it's lovely in the summertime, and people sit on the beach, they go swimming. It's very nice there. And then moving to the side there, there's on the way to the seaside, there is a very beautiful gardens. It's called the
Oh,
Bournemouth Gardens,
right.
with lovely trees, lovely flowers, very well kept,
Mm.
and it's very nice to walk through again in the summertime. And then we come down to the lower picture here. This is the central part of Bournemouth, and they did this part up, I would say maybe, gosh, 25, 30 years ago. It used to be a little bit different from this,
Mm.
and they made it look very, very nice there. Now Bournemouth is only, I think, from the 1800s. It's like maybe 1850s was the first time that it became a town. So it's
Oh,
still quite a new place,
I
uh, but it's got some very nice old buildings there as well. It's a very nice place to go to visit and also to live. It's very
I
nice,
see.
easy to live there, but not cheap.
I
It's not a cheap place, I'm
see.
afraid. If you're ever thinking of visiting there, it's a nice place to go to.
See.
Thank you.
Uh,
So, near to the Bournemouth Gardens, there used to be an ice rink.
oh,
Used to be, because now it's no longer there. It's closed. But when I was about 7 years old, I decided that I liked to do ice skating and started having lessons.
oh, I see.
So this is me when I was very young.
Uh-huh.
The black and white picture here was me skating around on the ice,
Uh-huh.
and I was able to then enter. Um, it was an exhibition, actually. I
Oh,
think it was an exhibition, and then also competition, and I won a prize
uh-huh.
with my skating.
I
And then
see.
later on, I was as I started to grow up, I got more experienced and better cat suits to wear with
Looks
the
very
sequins
nice.
on it. Yeah,
Like
I continue.
aiming at the Olympian.
Well, that was an idea at the time, but um, I decided that I wanted to focus on my school studies more.
I see.
So
Okay.
when I got into the senior school, which I'll show you a bit later on, I decided to focus on my studies to do something with my life rather than focus on sports.
I
Even
see.
though sports are really important, when it comes to your career, the academia has to take first place. So
Mhm.
I put the skating to the side,
I see.
and I stopped doing that, to my detriment, I must add. So ended up going to the Bournemouth School. This
Mm.
is or otherwise called Bournemouth School for Boys, although people just call it Bournemouth School. There's a girls' school which is about a mile down the road, very
Oh,
close to the boys' school, and that's called Bournemouth School for Girls.
I see. I see.
But this is just called Bournemouth School,
I see. It's
and this is
interesting, in the United States, we don't have any girls' school, boys' school, very rare, but in Japan, we
mm,
have. But
yeah,
so in England, you have a
also
similar system, I see. Uh-huh.
that's right. So this was purely a boys' school, and of course, lots of a kind of male related things went on there,
I
but
see.
we won't get into that. Um, but it's a very nice school, and I went there for how many years was that? 7 years
Mm.
until I qualified to go to university.
See.
So I studied at that school, which was the top school in the area. And
Mm.
my brother also went to that school as well. So it was a very nice place. Unfortunately, as you can see in the sky here, it's grey, and that's typical for England. Grey
I see.
skies, not very much sun. So this is when I actually was younger. This is, I think, when I was 18.
Oh,
and this was my final day of school, and this is my school friend called Lee,
I see.
and we were enjoying ourselves on the last day, and this is prior to university, so we were very happy that we just finished school for the last time.
I see.
We weren't sad. We weren't sad at all. Yeah. So this is where I ended up going. And several months later on, I embarked on my studies at University College London Medical School. And this is the main. This isn't the medical school part. This is the main university because UCL is a major university for many other subjects, and it
Right,
also
right.
has a medical school as well.
Mm,
So this is when you walk in through the front gates, this is what you see. And I fell in love with this place when I first saw it. I just walked through the gates and said, "I'm coming here." I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had to study, of course, but this is the place I wanted to come to
mm,
study, and it was brilliant to be there. Um, and the red brick building is I had actually this is the old hospital which they converted into lecture rooms.
mm.
So this is no longer an active hospital, at least not all of it. Some parts of it are for obstetrics and gynecology, but most of it is lecture rooms and offices now. But this used to be the hospital,
Mm.
and there was also very close to it the um, University College Hospital,
Oh, more
and that
than
was a
that.
very old. Well, that was an old building, and they smashed it down,
Oh,
and they built a entirely new building, and this is what replaced it.
oh, I see, I see.
So this kind of very lovely structure is the University College Hospital. I never got to I never got to go into it when I was
Oh, I
a
see, I see.
medical student, unfortunately, but it's a very nice building there.
Here you have like a blue sky.
Yeah, they may have put that in after when they took the photograph. Maybe they did Photoshop. Unusual day,
I
perhaps.
see. And this is a very famous like bus, right? Two stories
Oh yeah,
bus.
yeah, double decker. They're called
Yeah.
double decker buses. They're very famous, very common
Mm.
across the whole of the country. You see double decker buses. Yeah, and this emblem at the top here, this red cross. This is the emblem of the University of London.
Mm.
So, University of London is an umbrella that covers all of the universities that
Mhm.
exist in London.
I
So, it's
see.
the kind of authority of the universities of London and
Must be a
regulates them.
very like a historically very long history. This University College London.
Yeah, it is, and they have a um, kind of rivalry with King's College Hospital,
Oh, I see, I see. Oh, I
and
heard about the
it,
King's College, right?
yes, so the King traditionally King's College um, and the King's College Medical School and University College Medical School don't like each other. So there's the rivalry.
I see.
It, in your final year of medical school, you have, or at least at that time when I was in training, we had 3 months where we could do a medical elective.
Oh,
So we could go to anywhere. We could
mm.
stay in England if we wanted to, or we could go anywhere in the world to study something
I see, I
medical.
see.
So many of my colleagues went to Australia,
Mhm.
America, South Africa, where they could speak English
Mhm.
and learn something. I wasn't interested in that. I thought I want to do something that no one's ever done
I
before.
see, I see. New
And
challenge.
yeah, exactly. I wanted to kind of tread my own path. So I'd always been interested in Asia, China, Japan, and I'd never been to Asia in my life. So I embarked on trying to come to Japan. And so I started to write to several hospitals to ask if they would accept me as a medical elective.
Mm.
And I got really nowhere with any of them. They all rejected me and said, we don't know, we can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And on the very kind of early internet, it was still very early at that time,
Mhm.
I came across Dr. Stein.
Oh,
And Dr. Stein is this gentleman
Right.
here and here
Uh-huh.
on the photographs. And I contacted him at when he was working at Comeda Medical Center.
Mm.
And I asked if it was possible to do an elective. And he said, I'm not sure. I'll need to check with the Comeda Hospital and see if it's okay. And within a few days, he got back to me and said, they said, yes,
Oh,
I could do this. I was like, oh,
I
wow.
see.
He said, but you can only come for 1 month.
Mm.
But I had 3 months to kill. So he then contacted Dr. Alki,
Oh,
who
I
is
see.
the person in the lower photograph here.
Uh-huh.
And he also agreed to accept me for 1 month. So I had 2 months of medical elective that I could study something, and then I would spend the rest of the time visiting sites around Japan. So that's how I came here the first time.
I see. So that's a 1998.
Yes,
right? I see.
that's correct. That's correct. And so then I qualified in 1999, and I then did my medical jobs and rotating around different hospitals, learning.
In England, right? First.
In England. And my wife is Japanese, and we were discussing about what to do, whether to come back here or stay in England. But when I was first in Japan as a medical student, and I was still very much kind of an immature medical, I wouldn't say professional at that time, but medical person, I realized the differences between the training. And that the British system focuses very much so on the history and the physical. Yes, there's lab data. Yes, there's CT scans, but they're not used primarily. They're used secondarily. So the focus is much more on making the diagnosis from the patient's interview and the physical, and how to make differential diagnosis. And that I saw was missing in the doctors who I saw at Comedic Medical Center at that time. Now, they were better than many other doctors because they were trained by Dr. Stein.
That's right. He is also trying to,
Exactly.
encourage history physical, but in Japan, that's true, right?
So I also learned from Dr. Stein because the British system is much more harsh than the American system, because I explained to him how, I'd had training and the expectations. He said, oh, they don't do that in America anymore. We do it this way. So I learned from him the more softer American style.
I see.
I wouldn't say it's that soft, I have to say, but slightly softer. So I learned many things from him as well. But that's kind of what I ended up doing in Japan is teaching, because I wanted to really put across a different way to doctors here. I think much of the medical school training is focused here on, very little of it is focused on history taking, very little of it is on physical, and lots of it is on getting the scans, getting the data, getting this, getting that. And then at the end of it, you pull it together and then make a diagnosis. Whereas I was always taught the history of the physical, make your diagnosis, then do the tests to confirm or refute.
Confirm, right.
Yeah, because it's much more focused and hopefully costs less money.
Yeah, cost effective, I think.
Yeah. So I wanted to introduce that and push that idea home in my teaching, which is what I do today. So I have to say thank you really to initially to Dr. Stein, who I call my earth angel. He really is a really good guy.
Yeah, he's still teaching us,
he's still teaching.
Yeah, online.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's absolutely brilliant, and he has an amazing mind, and he thinks in many different ways. Despite his age, he's amazing. But he opened many doors for me, and all I can say is thank you to him. And the other person, of course, in the photo is Dr. Aoki, who also opened many doors. And of course, I must also add Dr. Machi, who's also opened many doors as well. So I'd like to say thank you to you as well.
Thanks.
I cannot say it's just because of me, because that would not be true. It's because of other people, and them seeing something in me that is helpful to help the doctors here,
Uh-huh.
and that's why I do it,
I see.
to help. But this is with Dr. Stein,
Uh-huh.
and with Dr. Aoki.
I see.
They did a combined conference at that time.
I see.
Uh, and this is in the next picture to the side of that, is myself and some of the residents.
Uh-huh.
We were coming down from the Ikkyoku, the old Ikkyoku, into the main hospital, which is now no longer in existence. It was destroyed after the new hospital was built. But behind me is Dr. Nishiguchi, who was
Oh,
a first-year resident at that time. And of course, now he's Naika Bucho, and we've written several books together
I see. I
and
see.
collaborated on papers and so forth. So it's yeah, just interesting to see looking back.
Mm.
So that was in 2006, and I was at the old hospital for 4 years,
Mm.
and they made in that time the new hospital, which opened in 2000, and I think it was 2010 October. And then, of course, the next year there was the massive earthquake, and then that was terrible.
Oh, that's right.
But what I'd like to show here is what I do on a day-to-day basis with my teaching.
Mhm.
So I hear patient cases, and we go always, if it's possible, go and see the patient.
Mhm.
I never am satisfied. As I say, I always question everything, even what the residents tell me,
Uh-huh.
because sometimes the residents don't get enough information, or their interpretation of the information is incorrect, or they listen to doctors from other hospitals who may be wrong. So I always question everything, retake the history, redo the physical exam, and in some cases, and they have made errors in their interpretation, and it actually ends up being something else.
I see.
So I teach them the techniques, and here I am doing percussion
Uh-huh.
on the posterior of chest of a patient to
Uh-huh.
demonstrate how to do the technique. And in the lower photograph here is at Shonan Kamakura Hospital when we had Dr. Tierney
Yeah, anyway, okay.
and Dr. Aoki, of course, there as well. So I also involved in sometimes assisting with those types of cases, usually as a scribing for other people. So yes, that's some of what I do, not all of what I do. And during the COVID-19 crisis, that pandemic, much of the teaching went online.
Mm.
And although, I mean, as we're doing now, you're sitting in Hawaii and I'm sitting in Kamakura area. This is amazing. Who would have thought?
Uh-huh.
I was actually doing a kind of primordial kind of teaching online over 10 years ago. I started doing teaching online.
Mm.
I used to have a whiteboard behind me in this room, and I would do
Uh-huh.
teaching,
I see. I
but
see.
people couldn't see. They couldn't read the writing because it was too small, and it was via Skype, which is who uses Skype anymore? I don't think anyone really uses it seriously. But everything went online with coronavirus. Now it was convenient to do case conferences. Yeah, great. You sit down at your own desk
Uh-huh.
and you can have a coffee, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
But when it came to, yeah,
but the setback is you cannot do the physical examination, right?
exactly, exactly. You couldn't do physical exams. So what I was finding is that medical students coming through as doctors had no skills at all with physical exam because they were not permitted to see patients. So they got their medical license without being able to examine or have any knowledge of physical. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? But during the early part of the COVID-19, even before the vaccines came out, I think I avoided going to the wards for 2 or 3 months.
Mm.
And in the end, I just said, enough. If I catch the virus, I catch the virus. I'm going to wear PPE. Yeah, sure. But I thought, I don't want to get de-skilled. And I need to teach residents what what to do. So this was still when I was at
I see.
Shonan-Kamakura Hospital. And so I went back to the wards
I see.
3 months into the coronavirus, and I carried on going to the wards. And when the vaccine was available, then great, things were a bit better. But it's terrible to get de-skilled, and I was feeling myself getting de-skilled by not seeing patients. It's terrible. So online's good, but it's certainly not a fix. You can't learn medicine this way, not properly. So that was then, and I've also written several books. My first one was in 2012, which is the live case conferences, on which I collaborated with Dr. Kenji Inoue from the Juntendo Nerima Hospital. He's a cardiologist with a strong interest in general medicine, and he also has conferences with Dr. Aoki and had with Dr. Tierney and Dr. Stein. So he's very open-minded, and he collaborated with me on that book.
Yeah, I know him too, because I go to Juntendo Nerima,
Ah, wonderful.
Yeah,
so
because I'm from Juntendo, right? So
wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
I go even now once a year or so. I go there.
Right. Yes, he's very well. He just did a marathon just recently, but he's keeping well. So then I was asked to collaborate with Dr. Nishiguchi, who was in the previous photograph when he was a junior doctor, and he made a book called Rounding the Patients, which I was asked to collaborate with a little bit. So we did some work on that several years ago, and then my most recent production was just at the middle one, which is at the end of last year, October, and this kind of is a book really about professionalism. And I think that's something again that is really missing in terms of teaching from medical school.
Japanese education, right?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of see one and just do it like the professor does, or do it like the other senior doctor did it. But that doesn't mean to say that it's the right way to be towards the patient. So I've got 35 real life episodes of what happened to me when I was a junior doctor. Now, of course, all the names are changed, or there's no mention of which hospitals or anything. So they're kind of anonymized doctor names, anonymized patient names, but the detail is exactly correct. And it documents the good episodes and the bad episodes I experienced. And what I learned from that, and my takeaway messages that I use as a medical professional, that I hope I can then give to doctors or medical students who read this, or even before medical school, so they can understand not to make similar mistakes and to learn to be more professional. Because I think that is really important. It's not just about knowledge. It's not just about techniques of doing things. It's how you are towards your patients. That's really important, and it's something that I find that is lacking.
That's very important.
Done better. Yeah. I actually have 2 more books that are waiting to be published. One is on how to write case reports for Japanese doctors in English. So that's waiting to be translated. And I've also just finished one on physical examination for general internal medicine. So that's waiting as well. Good. So eventually, maybe in the next year or so, those 2 books will also be out.
Good.
So I like to write. I'm keeping busy with writing. So what was my kind of influence to become a doctor?
Okay.
Well, because I get asked this question. Oh, why did you want to become a doctor? And actually, this is a question that I ask doctors when they're having interviews to enter the hospital, or preparation for going across to the United States to have interviews there. They're going to ask these kinds of questions, and it's really important to have good answers. So, I mean, what happened in my life was when I was a youngster, my mother, who's the top photograph there, she had Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome since she was a child,
Mm.
and she never had any treatment for it. In fact, she didn't know what it was at the time because they used to just spontaneously come and go. But the situation got worse when she was in her, I would say, 30s. And she ended up in the local hospital, and the doctors were really kind of fighting to control this arrhythmia.
Mm.
And eventually, after several hospitalizations and emergencies where I thought she was going to die, they came up with giving her amiodarone. And that was an extremely effective drug for her, which she stayed on for about a decade until she
Right.
had ablation therapy.
Mm.
And she's now in her 70s. So, she's done very, very well without any major side effects from that drug. So that was I would say, a kind of subliminal or a subconscious
Mm.
influence to become a doctor. Because at that time, when she was in the hospital, I made a card. I still remember I made a kind of get well card, and inside of it, I drew a heart and all the conduction system, even back then.
Oh,
And I gave it to her, and the doctors saw it in the ward
oh.
and made some comments about it. So I think at that point, that was the kind of the influence.
Mm.
Then later on, I'm very interested in science fiction and space,
Uh-huh.
and I became very interested in watching Star Trek.
Oh, yeah,
Now,
I know that.
yeah, I mean, in America, Star Trek, everyone knows it, but I mentioned Star Trek here in Japan, and people go, "What's that?" Different generation, and even to the older doctors, they go, "What was Star Trek?" Oh, but it's an extremely popular Western sci-fi space
Right.
TV series, and there's many different Star Trek offshoots that have been made over the years. So the doctors, they always have a doctor on the ship, and my first influence was Dr. McCoy,
Oh.
who was the older oldest gentleman here, and he was from the original Star Trek series with not Patrick Stewart, and that's William Shatner and Leonard McCoy. So Leonard Nimoy, I should say, Leonard Nimoy, who was Spock. So he was Bones. This they called him Bones. So he was a major influence. And then moving on from there was Voyager, and this the middle doctor here was a 3D projection.
Mm.
He wasn't. He was a computer generated doctor as an
Oh,
emergency
I
doctor,
see.
and
Yeah.
also a great influence. Particularly the bald head, which is here. And then finally, the Star Trek: The Next Generation, there was Dr. Crusher,
Oh,
and she worked with Patrick Stewart, who's a British actor, who was the captain.
I
Now, I
see.
wanted to mention this middle one here. He didn't actually have a name. He was just called the Doctor because
Oh,
he was a electronic
I see. I see.
projection. So he didn't actually have a name, and he couldn't choose a name. So until later on in the series, but yeah, so these things were major influences to me as I was growing up.
I see. I see. So
And
similar to
mm,
me, when I was maybe 12, 13 years old, I was watching a TP, so-called like a Ben Casey. I don't know, you mean it's
right,
American, I don't
I
know.
I think I've heard of. Yes, I
Yeah,
think I've heard of
Ben
them. Yeah,
Casey. That is a neurosurgeon and a very
right.
cool guy. And
Yep,
but he's already thinking about the patient, you know.
right.
So I really influenced about his
Yeah,
attitude in patient care. And that time I was thinking, you know, I couldn't remember, but my parents told me that I was
right,
thinking to be you know, the doctor like Ben Casey.
right. I think there was Dr. Kildare.
Yeah,
Do you
Dr.
remember?
Q there, right?
Yeah, that was American as well. And I used to watch Dr. Kildare, and I thought, yeah, he's pretty cool as well.
That's right.
And then there was Quincy, who
Ah,
was the
Quincy, right?
pathologist, and everyone collapsing at the beginning of the show because he pulls back the cover of a dead patient. They all collapse on the floor, and I found that very intriguing as well. So it wasn't just Star Trek that was the influence. There were the other TV shows with doctors in it as well as with you. Um, but at school, I also found at the secondary school that I showed you the photo of, I was also very interested in biology, particularly human biology.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that was another influence. So I've had multiple influences over my life. And so to me, it was kind of a natural thing. At about the age of 16, you had to choose at school, what do you want to do in the future? And so I got into the medical school. I got the examinations that I needed. And it was at that point that I realized now I've got to actually put my foot down on the accelerator and start working. And that's when I started working. And I really worked really hard for at least the first 2 years to build the foundation of my knowledge. What I find in Japan is that the pre-university students, they work really hard to get into the university,
That's
and then
right.
they get in and they go, oh, I can relax now.
Yeah, that's right.
For me, it was the opposite. I was kind of like, oh, well, I get into university, then I'll start working. And I was lucky I got into the university, and then I really started working. And I didn't really stop. I kind of slightly relaxed, I'd say, from about the third year onwards, because I did a 1 year degree. So I was able to relax a little bit. But I still worked really hard. Yeah, it was my driving force, really.
Okay, good.
So this is kind of things that keep me going, because I think as you go through your career, sometimes you can lose your direction. You keep doing the same thing day in, day out, and you say to yourself, why am I doing this? Is there anything else? What drives me to keep going? Now, the person below is my deceased mother-in-law, and she died about coming up to about 3 years ago. It's about 2.5 years ago at this time, and she had disseminated cancer. And this was her in the hospital. I went to go and see her, and I was the one that suggested that we get photographs taken, because she didn't survive much longer after that. So I was quite happy, very happy that we got that. But I am interested in the end of life. And I know that many doctors, they probably think to themselves, I must do everything to keep patients alive as long as possible. That's what doctors do. And I'm here to tell you that's not true.
Right.
That's not true at all. And I'm sure, as you know, Dr. Machi, once patients get to the point of no return, where you cannot keep them alive any longer, then you have to focus on palliative care for them, so that they can die with dignity, without pain, and they can have a good death instead of a tragically bad death in pain, with doctors trying to do everything for them when nothing is ever going to work. So my focus, not my focus, but some of the things that keep me interested in medicine, where I think I can make a difference, is the end of life process. Because, as I say, doctors here, they don't want to even think about it. They don't want to deal with it. It's just, I must keep them going. I give them this antibiotic, I give them this drug, I send them to the ICU, I intubate them. And I have to say to sometimes, what are you doing?
Right.
This patient is dying. You need to change the treatment to something which is not going to cause them any harm, because you can no longer keep them going. They're going to die no matter what you do. Better that they have a nicer way out than with what you're doing.
Okay.
So I'm interested in the end of life process. I'm interested in something called deathbed visitations. I'm not sure if you've come across this. I'm sure you have, because in America they're kind of very up on this. But in the last few months, of patients who are dying, for example, of cancer, they're not necessarily dying quickly. As they come towards the end of their life, they may start to see family members coming into their room. And it's not that they're hallucinating. And this is a well-recognized phenomena, and more people are describing this. in people who are dying, and they're having visitations from their family members. That's kind of a more spiritual side of the dying process. So I'm interested in that. And I'm kind of also more interested in the path of the soul after death. So that's a side issue from medicine. That's after they died. So these things I'm interested in, and maybe there'll be another book. Maybe there'll be a book on
Yes,
palliative
yeah,
care.
that may be a very important. So maybe you should publish such kind of,
Yeah, I really do think doctors need to focus on palliative care. They don't. I don't know why there's kind of like, oh, well, that's only for cancer, isn't it? It's not. It's not. And I think America does it very well. The UK also does it very well. If there are certain criteria that are met of end stage disease, where it's no longer amenable to curative treatment, then they are candidates for palliative care, and it doesn't have to be cancer.
Yeah.
And I think that this idea is really kind of alien here. That
Yeah, that's true.
palliative care is only for cancer. It's not at all. And this idea of like, it's giving up, you don't care. That's absolutely wrong. It's that you do care.
That's right.
That you're doing that for the patient rather than not really caring because you're only caring about your own ego. That I must keep them alive. Who are you doing it for then? No, you're doing it for you.
Yeah.
That's ego. And you have to take your ego out of it and say, I need to do what's best for the patient. And maybe that is not keeping them alive longer.
Right.
It's allowing them to die with dignity. I'm doing it for them,
Right.
not
Yeah.
myself. So this idea, I'm trying to slowly push.
Very important. Japan is like a very, elderly population now, but still like compared to United States or maybe England, like palliative care, terminal, care, so-called geriatrics, the people who really take care of these patients is a little behind in the teaching and the actual healthcare, I think.
Yes, that's right. And when I'm on, for example, ward rounds, and I suggest that patient might need some palliative care, there is a kind of uneasiness of silence because I can see that there is disagreement in that idea. But again, that's the doctor's ego, and doctors need to really understand that having an ego actually is not good for the patient. So
that maybe motivate continue to
yes,
work, motivate you, I
that's
think.
right. I see so many patients who suffer needlessly, and it affects me very deeply, and I don't like to see that. So if I can help, even if I can just help one person, that's one step forwards. So my words of wisdom, I don't know if it's really wisdom or not, but this is what I like to consider, is to question everything. And sometimes I hear comments from doctors and I think, what? That doesn't sound right. And if it doesn't sound right, it may not necessarily be right. So let's always question it. And that means not just say, oh, I don't believe you. That's not what I'm saying. Is to go away with that idea from what you've been told and investigate it. Look it up. Check. Go to a good resource like Up to Date, or go to PubMed and see what papers there are. Is there anything to support what you've been told? If it's to do with a patient, go back, speak to the patient. Is what I've been told by this doctor correct? Or is the interpretation wrong? Was the patient confused at the time, and now they're saying something different? So go back, recheck. If you're told about a particular diagnosis that sounds a bit strange, right, or an allergy they're supposed to have, but actually it doesn't sound like an allergy, question it, go back, get more information, recheck. Because at the end of the day, if you don't recheck and you're accepting something that's wrong, you're complicit with that as well. So by going back and rechecking, you're being safe. And safety is everything in medicine. If you're not safe, you're going to get a lawsuit. And it's not just about covering yourself, but you also have a responsibility for the patient.
Mm.
And that goes above everything, including your colleagues. Your patients come first. And again, this is something which I have a bone to pick about what goes on in Japan, because I see not everywhere, but in many places, patients are not put first. Doctors are put first. Again, this idea that the kind of doctors are more godly and that they come first and the patients end up coming last is the wrong way round.
Right.
Patients come first. And that's another thing that I cannot change. I wish I could, but it's very, very difficult.
You can slowly changing.
I try, but it's a difficult process. Yeah. So question everything.
Good.
In a polite way, though. In a polite way. So I also am interested, as I've kind of mentioned about Star Trek. Star Trek is sci-fi, and part of the sci-fi, which has now become reality, is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
They had computers with artificial intelligence on Star Trek decades ago, so they've just caught up now. They're just catching up. But what can artificial intelligence be used for in medicine? Well, I think it's going to become very dominant in medicine, and that will be for example, with diagnostics. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's just imagine that a doctor has taken down some history or is speaking to the patient. I can imagine that in the future, doctors will wear a lapel camera, just like the police do, for example. But this is capturing the patient interview.
I see.
And from it, it's pulling out what the patient says, what the doctor's asking, and then it creates the narrative in writing, but in a concise way, not the whole interview. It can certainly do that, but it will make a concise history, including the past medical history, and it may be able to also check with the computer system and other computer systems, linking up that information from maybe the healthcare provider, the family medicine, outpatient appointments, and pulling all of this into one area, including the medications, the family history, social history, and so forth. And so the doctor will not have to write very much. It will just go through and say, yep, that's correct, that's correct, that's correct. Yep, I agree with that. And also the physical exam. If there's a camera there, it will be able to interpret the physical exam and also write down the physical findings, especially when the doctor says, the blood pressure is and the heart rate is. And I pick up that there's a cardiac murmur and so on. As you would normally say, if you have a scriber there who's maybe a junior doctor. When I was a junior doctor, when the senior doctor was interviewing and examining, I had to write everything down.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish doctors here would do that, but they don't. I had to write it all down on behalf of the senior doctor, because it's a team. But I see in the future that the doctors will wear these lapels and it will record that information and then tabulate it in the correct order, because it's artificial intelligence. So I think it's going to save doctors a lot of time. And from that information that the doctor has gathered, although the doctor is probably thinking of the diagnosis, this will also assist in saying, hey, did you consider this diagnosis and this one and this one? Doctor says, I didn't think about that. And it also makes the doctor safer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be very kind of integrated. So it's going to be diagnostics, patient interview, differential diagnosis, the notation, which I mentioned slightly earlier, but also it's going to be checking the drugs, which they have these days anyway on the EMR system. You put the drugs in, it will flag up any drug interactions. I think this will do it on the fly. It will do it automatically, as the patient says, and you say, "Oh, I think I'm going to prescribe this drug on this drug." They flag up, "Hang on, doctor, this is a drug interaction here. Did you measure this and consider this?" "Oh, yes." So it will make doctors safer,
Yeah, I think so.
but
Yeah.
it shouldn't be there to replace the doctor, because it certainly can't do that yet, and I hope not ever. But I think it will make doctors a lot safer and will help to train the doctors who don't have enough knowledge. And there are lots of those doctors around who don't have enough knowledge. And you can't have knowledge in every area. But you see, I don't have knowledge in every area either. And I have to check stuff. I have to go to Up to Date or other medical texts. But with the current AI, which is improving, you can ask it a question in medicine and a clinical scenario with several different diseases interacting, and it can give you pretty good answers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only going to improve in time. So in the end, you'll be able to ask it a question as a theoretical medical question, and it will come out with, I think, eventually, very good answers that will be there to assist the doctors and to train them to make them better.
Even
So I
right
see
now,
AI.
like a chat GPT, if you put good information, they answer pretty good, you know.
They do.
Yeah.
But just imagine what it would be like in 5 years' time. And it's got the whole of the, well, depending on what it's got access to.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's got able to get access to all the major databases of information, PubMed, Up to Date, New England Journal, if it can have access to these kinds of journals and pull the information in, it's going to be a very, very powerful package for doctors. And so I can only see it being an improvement to help augment doctors, making them safer for patients. So it's a very exciting time to live in this kind of AI era. Maybe I'll get my Star Trek wish in the end. I don't know. I'm not sure which ship I'll go on there. So, what should young doctors do?
People do, okay.
Yeah, for the future. To what should you do now or from now on? As I kind of said in earlier on in this interview, you got to study hard. It's not something where you can just go into medical school. Oh, I did my studies at school. Now I just have to just tread water for 6 years and I'll get my medical degree. If that's what you're thinking, don't do medicine. Don't bother. If you're not prepared to work for it because you want to actually be a doctor, don't bother. You just be a low-level doctor, and it's just really not something I would advise. So please study hard.
And not just one time to get into medical school, but the whole life you have to continuously study.
You've got to. I mean, medicine is. I'm still learning. I'm making mistakes all the time, but hopefully smaller mistakes than the ones that I made earlier in life. These things happen. But small mistakes, you think, I need to know where I made that mistake. And therefore, I need to fill in the gap in my knowledge that I didn't know existed until I made the mistake. So you've got to continuously fill in the gaps in your knowledge, and it's never full. If you think that you know everything, you know nothing. You have to admit that you know nothing, and then you can start to learn. But that means you've got to be active in your learning process. So studying hard, I agree, it's a lifelong process. You should never, ever stop studying. So that's my advice for the first part. And of course, technology is now here. Use it to assist you, but do not rely on it to tell you. If you rely on the technology to tell you, it means you haven't studied. And that means that if the electricity goes off, if your device dies, you can't get access to it, you're no good.
That's true.
So it's the same thing with CT scanners, MRI scanners, any kind of lab data technology. It needs electricity. It needs to have chemicals. It needs whatever to be put into it. All you need to function is food and water and some studying. And you've got a brain between your ears, your hands, your sense of smell. You've got your eyes. and hopefully a stethoscope. Make sure you always have a stethoscope with you. You can be just as effective, if not better, and I would say better, than the machines put together with the lab data machines. But you just need to study. If you rely on the machines to tell you, because you can't be bothered, go and do something else. Go and do a different career. Being a doctor means you've got to be focused on being the best person you can be for your patients. Not, well, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to click a few buttons and then I'll make a diagnosis then. Do something else. That's not a doctor. That's a technician. So don't rely on technology. But once you get into medical school, please make sure that you study properly anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, pharmacology, and the major basic subjects, because they are actually used in everyday practice, not with every patient, but they're used on various patients that you've got under your care. If you do not focus on that and you say, oh, well, I just had to learn it to get through the test, do something else. You need to be using these to help your patients. If you don't understand how a drug works, that's dangerous, especially if you're giving it to a patient. And there are many doctors who do not understand how the drugs work. And that's really dangerous. So make sure you learn them. If you don't know, check, learn it on the job. But as I say, studying is a lifelong process. It's an everyday process. Study, 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 because you need to be a better version of yourself to be better for your patients. So it comes back to that, this foundation of knowledge. The other thing that I think is important is learn to speak to patients and to examine them. Again, don't rely on the machines to make the diagnosis. That comes from you. You make the diagnosis. But if you can't speak to patients and you don't know how to examine them and you're relying on machines, you're never going to be the best version of yourself as a doctor. So speaking to patients means you've got to force yourself to do it. I know that people in society, they don't want to interact. They just want to, drift past one another without saying anything. If you're going to be a doctor, you've got to be interactive with patients and you've got to speak to them clearly, concisely, honestly, many, many different ways that you've got to be speaking to them. But you've got to be able to get information from them and to go deep, not just superficial, but very deep into the interview. And then from medical school, hopefully if they teach adequately, to learn how to do physical exam and then to practice it, get better at it. So finally, this is an interesting thing. I think if you want to be a doctor, you've got to be the person who steps forward to help rather than being asked to or just doing nothing and stepping back. You've got to be proactive. You're here to save patients if you can. You've got to try and save them. But that means you've got to be proactive. But if you're kind of you don't want to be a proactive person, or I don't want to get involved in that, go and do something else. You're here to make a difference as a doctor. But if you're too timid or too scared to do this kind of thing, then you need to consider something else. So be the person that steps forward. I myself have had to step forwards, for example, people in the street who have had injuries, collapsed. When I've needed to, I step in and get involved until the paramedics arrive, and then move them on to the paramedics. But as a doctor, that's what you've got to do. You've got to be the one that steps forward and say, "Hey, I'm the doctor. Let me see if I can help here." Okay, so that's a really important thing, helping people. So as I mentioned a bit earlier on, what do I want to kind of be focusing on in the future? So I want to better understand patients' experiences and at the time of death. So as I mentioned, the deathbed visitations, I want to try and understand that better, and to teach doctors that palliative or comfort care, or terminal care, is not a failure or a withdrawal of treatment. It's not a withdrawal of treatment. It's a change of treatment.
Mm.
You're not withdrawing anything. You're just changing it to something that is more appropriate. And that is essential for the provision of care for dying patients, I believe. And to write more books to teach doctors how to be better versions of themselves, because we all can be better versions, and me too. I don't think I'm the best version yet. I hope I will be in the future, but it's a work in progress.
I see. Good.
And I think it's also important to have things that you do outside of medicine,
Uh-huh.
not just focus on medicine. I think you can become too, how can I say, too serious. And that can be depressing sometimes, especially if you're
That's
seeing
right.
lots of death.
And burnout.
That's right. Burnout is a major problem. So one of the things that keeps me busy is running. So I like to go running. This is down at Enoshima
Oh, I see.
a couple of years ago.
Uh-huh.
I actually went running this morning. I did a 10K before doing this
Oh,
doing
really?
this interview. So I'm surprised I'm still awake at this point. But yeah, it gets rid of the stress.
Uh-huh.
Any stress that you get, for example, I go running, then I come back and I'm so exhausted. I haven't got time to feel stressed. So have something that is an outlet, whether it's
Yeah, that's true.
running, something else. I also do ice skating sometimes as well. I
You
still do
you
that.
do.
Yeah. In Osaka, I do. Yeah.
All right.
So thank you very much. So that's the end.
Thank you very much for your talk, and
For the time being.
I agree what you said many aspects, but enjoyed your talk, and then hopefully you can continue teaching Japanese young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. If anyone's interested to check out, I have a website which is listed down at the bottom here, called bedsidebootcamp.com as one word. So please check that out. And I update it sometimes, not regularly, but sometimes.
Good. Okay.
Thank you very
much. Joel, thank you very much for your presentation and talk. And I really enjoy what you said and agree with what you said. Particularly, I thought you are more like because you focus on the H&P and making diagnosis and other things. Whenever we have a web conference, recently. But today I understand you are now not shifting, but more another focus is like a terminal care, end of life care, these things, and which is very important. And I hope you can maybe write a book, but also teach young generation, because when people are young, they really try to cure the patient, right?
They do.
Do the best, best to do to keep patient alive and cure the disease. But everybody die eventually. So
that's right.
Terminal care is pretty important. So, and to understand the terminal care or palliative care when you are young enough, that's very helpful for that doctor, but also the patient, and that really you explained to me and that this audience, that's very important.
The longer you stay in medicine and the more patients and more scenarios you see, you begin to realize that in many instances you can't really make much of a difference, because when they get to the hospital, they're really in a kind of end of life situation. If it's an acute problem like an infection, maybe you can, but in many instances there isn't much you can do, and you need to kind of understand that what you can provide is very limited. But I think junior doctors, when they come through, they're kind of very egotistical and full of energy, and they feel that they have to do everything. But what they think is their best is only in their minds. And as they, so, at least from my perspective, as I became more aware of these situations, I understood that there's not much that I can do. And sometimes doing less is better than doing all of these things.
Right, that's true.
Yeah. So that's only something you can learn with time.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
if I can get this idea across to doctors that it's great if you can do something, but it's important to realize soon rather than later that you cannot do much more.
Mm.
That's what's best for the patient.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
So
today
thank you
you
very
also
much.
talked about AI, and my background is a doctor AI, here, over
Yeah.
here. But
Yeah.
we should be a doctor human rather than doctor AI. So, and the
That's
Joel
right.
Branch is a doctor human, I think. So
I hope
I
so.
just make some background like this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, by the way, you've been to Hawaii before?
I haven't been to Hawaii before.
Oh,
No,
you should
no.
come.
Well, thank you. If I ever get time, I'll
Sure,
try.
you should come to Hawaii and do some teaching over here too. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And when
Thank you
you
very
come in
much.
Hawaii, in Hawaii we have some sign like this. We call it a shaka
Right.
sign. And
Yeah.
it's like in Japan, like peace or good or
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
this is aloha, thank you, how are you? So these are
Oh,
the
I
things
see. Right.
you should remember when you come to Hawaii,
Okay.
and everybody
Just that.
welcome you.
Okay.
So maybe I see you maybe in Japan, hopefully sometime soon.
Yes.
But
Thank you very much.
communicate each other and continue teaching young generation together.
Well, thank you very much for kindly asking me to be interviewed today. Thank you very much. And I hope that what I've shown today on the 21st, sorry, 25th,
Yes, right.
25th of February 2024, if you're seeing this in the future, I hope that it's useful for you.
Yeah,
So
sure. I'm sure it's
thank you
useful.
very
Yeah.
much. And let's see with what my prediction is, whether it comes true or not.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's see.
Yeah, I have to live a little long enough to find out your prediction is
You
coming true or
do.
not.
You have to live longer.
Thank you.